In this episode, we turn our attention to the part of the journey that often feels the most personal, which is the day you actually sit down to take certified in Risk and Information Systems Control, CRISC. For many brand new learners, the stress of exam day can feel larger than the content itself, because once a date is set, preparation stops being an abstract goal and starts feeling like a real performance. That emotional shift is completely normal, and it is one of the reasons exam day preparation deserves serious attention instead of being treated like a minor afterthought. A lot of capable students do not struggle because they failed to study enough. They struggle because anxiety, poor pacing, unrealistic expectations, and mental fatigue interfere with the knowledge they already built. Good exam day preparation is really about protecting your thinking. It helps you arrive with steadier attention, more realistic expectations, and enough emotional control to let your judgment work the way it was trained to work during the weeks of study that came before. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyberauthor.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. One of the most helpful ways to prepare mentally is to stop imagining exam day as a dramatic final showdown where everything depends on feeling perfectly confident from the first minute to the last. That picture is attractive because it feels decisive, but it usually creates the wrong emotional standard. Most people do not walk into a serious certification exam feeling calm, sharp, inspired, and completely certain about every topic. They usually arrive with some nervous energy, some lingering doubt, and at least a little fear that they may forget something important. None of that means they are unprepared. It means they are human and they understand the exam matters. A healthier mindset is to expect some tension and still trust your preparation anyway. You do not need to feel fearless to perform well. You need to stay functional under normal pressure. Once learners accept that nervousness can exist without becoming failure, they begin to approach the day more realistically. That realism matters because it reduces the shock of normal stress and helps prevent panic when the exam feels difficult, which it almost certainly will at some point. Another important part of exam day preparation is understanding what success on the day actually depends on. Many beginners assume the deciding factor will be whether they happen to remember a few difficult facts at the right moment. While memory certainly matters, exam performance usually depends more on stable reasoning, disciplined reading, and emotional steadiness than on dramatic flashes of recall. On a certification like CRISC, you are not just pulling definitions out of your head. You are reading scenarios, noticing the role of governance, identifying ownership, judging business impact, and choosing the answer that best fits structured risk thinking. That means exam day is not simply a retrieval exercise. It is a judgment exercise carried out under time pressure. Mentally preparing for that reality changes the way you think about the day. Instead of hoping your brain suddenly becomes brilliant, you focus on giving yourself the best conditions for clear reasoning. That includes rest, pacing, calm self-talk, and a willingness to trust process over emotion. When learners understand that, they stop waiting for a magical feeling and start preparing for a steady performance. The period just before the exam is also part of exam day preparation because what you do in the final stretch often affects your mental state more than the material itself. A common mistake is trying to cram so hard at the end that the mind becomes overloaded, restless, and unable to settle. This creates the illusion of dedication, but it often weakens focus and increases self-doubt. A better approach is to spend that final window reinforcing what is already familiar rather than desperately chasing everything that still feels uncertain. Your goal is not to prove that you can study until the last possible second. Your goal is to arrive with a mind that is organized enough to think clearly. That means reducing unnecessary mental clutter and reminding yourself of the big patterns that guide the exam, such as governance, business alignment, ownership, assessment, response, and monitoring. The final stretch should support clarity, not chaos. If the mind reaches the exam already tired from frantic review, the quality of reasoning can drop before the first question even appears, and that is a very preventable problem. The morning of the exam matters partly because it sets your emotional tone. If the start of the day feels rushed, confused, or disorderly, that stress can follow you into the testing environment and consume mental energy that should be saved for the exam itself. This does not mean you need some perfect ritual or a dramatic motivational routine. It simply means you want the morning to feel manageable and predictable. When the basic parts of the day are calm, the brain has less reason to interpret the situation as chaotic or threatening. Many learners underestimate how much their state of mind is shaped by ordinary friction. Small frustrations, time pressure, and self-imposed urgency can make it feel as though the exam is already going badly before it begins. Mentally preparing means protecting yourself from that unnecessary escalation. Think of the morning as the runway, not the flight. You want a smooth takeoff so your attention is still available when the exam begins. That emotional steadiness becomes especially important when the first difficult question appears, because you want to meet challenge from a stable baseline rather than from accumulated tension. It is also useful to know what to expect psychologically when you first sit down and the exam becomes real. For many people, there is a small spike of adrenaline at the beginning, even if they were calm earlier. Suddenly the room, the timer, the format, and the stakes all become concrete. That moment can feel unsettling, and some candidates misread it as a sign that they are losing control. In reality, it is often just the mind adjusting to performance mode. One of the most helpful forms of mental preparation is simply expecting that moment and deciding in advance not to overreact to it. You may notice your breathing change, your attention narrow, or your inner voice become louder for a few minutes. That is not necessarily a problem. The key is to let the initial wave pass without attaching a story to it. If you begin telling yourself that your nerves mean disaster, the feeling grows. If you treat it as a normal transition into concentration, it usually fades. Knowing this ahead of time can make the opening moments far easier to handle. Once the exam starts, one of the best mental strategies is to settle into rhythm instead of chasing early certainty. Many candidates want immediate reassurance, so they treat the first few questions as if those questions must prove the whole exam will go well. If the early questions feel awkward or unfamiliar, panic can build far too quickly. The truth is that the opening section of the exam does not need to feel easy for you to perform well overall. What matters much more is whether you establish a steady pattern of reading carefully, identifying what the question is really asking, and choosing answers with discipline rather than fear. Rhythm is powerful because it reduces the emotional importance of any single question. You stop measuring your future against every moment and start focusing on process. Mentally, that is a huge advantage. It keeps you grounded in action instead of speculation. A learner who builds rhythm can recover from uncertainty much more easily than a learner who keeps trying to use each question as a test of self-worth. Exam day becomes more manageable when the goal is stable reasoning, not immediate emotional comfort. Pacing is another major part of what to expect on exam day, because mental strain grows when time feels either too fast or too slow. Some candidates rush because they are nervous and want to escape the discomfort of uncertainty. Others move so slowly that each difficult question turns into a long internal struggle that drains attention from the rest of the exam. Good mental preparation means deciding before the exam that your job is to keep moving with thoughtfulness, not to squeeze perfect certainty out of every scenario. There will almost certainly be questions where two answers look close or where the wording feels heavier than expected. In those moments, pacing becomes a form of emotional discipline. You read, reason, eliminate what does not fit, choose the strongest option you can support, and continue. This helps preserve energy for the full length of the exam. When pacing breaks down, frustration often follows, and frustration is mentally expensive. A steady pace tells the nervous system that the situation is manageable. That message matters more than many learners realize, because calm pacing can protect judgment just as effectively as content review. Difficult questions deserve special attention because they are often where mental preparation either helps or fails. A hard question can trigger several bad reactions at once. You may feel suddenly unsure. You may assume you missed some critical concept during study, or you may start projecting failure far beyond that one moment. None of those reactions improve performance. In fact, they usually make the next question harder too. A better way to prepare mentally is to expect some hard questions and decide in advance what they will mean. They will mean only that you are taking a serious exam with serious standards. They will not automatically mean you are underprepared or that the exam is slipping away from you. When a difficult item appears, your task is not to eliminate all discomfort. Your task is to think clearly enough to make the best judgment available. That may involve slowing down for a moment, identifying the underlying concept, and ruling out answers that do not fit the logic of risk management. One hard question does not define the day unless you let it reshape your entire emotional state. Another thing to expect is that the mind may try to play tricks on you as the exam continues. Fatigue can make familiar concepts seem suddenly unfamiliar. A word you know well may look strange for a few seconds, or two answers may both seem correct simply because your concentration is thinning. This can be unsettling if you are not prepared for it. Mental preparation means recognizing that these moments are normal effects of sustained effort, not reliable indicators that your knowledge has disappeared. The answer is usually not to panic or to start rereading everything in an increasingly frantic way. The answer is to notice that your mind is tired and respond with steadiness. Return to the question, identify the core issue, and lean on the reasoning habits you practiced during study. This is one reason disciplined preparation matters so much. On exam day, your mind will not always feel fresh, but habits can still carry you. What you practiced repeatedly becomes the structure that supports you when comfort and confidence begin to fluctuate. And that is exactly why mental training deserves respect. Self-talk also plays a huge role in exam performance, even though many learners never think about it directly. Throughout the exam, your mind will comment on what is happening. It may say that a question feels easy, or that another one feels impossible, or that you are falling behind, or that you should have studied differently. This internal commentary can either help you stay focused or quietly sabotage your concentration. Good mental preparation includes learning to keep that inner voice simple and useful. The most effective self-talk is usually calm, brief, and practical. Remind yourself to read carefully, stay in the question, trust process, and keep moving. Avoid dramatic judgments about how the day is going, because those judgments are rarely accurate in the middle of the exam and often make performance worse. It is surprisingly helpful to speak to yourself in the same steady tone a good instructor would use. Not harsh, not panicked, and not falsely cheerful. Just clear and grounded. That kind of internal voice reduces emotional noise and helps keep your attention where it belongs, which is on the reasoning required by the question in front of you. Physical state and mental state are also closely linked, and that connection becomes more obvious on exam day. When the body tightens, breathing becomes shallow, shoulders tense, or posture collapses under stress, concentration often becomes narrower and more fragile. This does not mean exam success depends on mastering some elaborate wellness technique. It means you should understand that your body can either support calm thinking or quietly intensify stress. During the exam, simple awareness helps. If you notice that you are rushing or feeling trapped in one question, it can help to pause briefly, loosen tension, and take a slower breath before continuing. That tiny reset can interrupt the buildup of panic and keep a hard moment from spilling into the next several questions. New learners sometimes assume mental preparation is all inside the mind, but the body participates in concentration whether you acknowledge it or not. Respecting that reality gives you one more tool for staying steady. On a long exam, even small resets can protect clarity, and clarity is one of the most valuable things you can preserve. As the exam moves into its later stages, one of the biggest psychological challenges is avoiding collapse in confidence simply because you feel tired. Fatigue often creates a false story that says you are doing badly when what is actually happening is that sustained concentration is becoming harder. If you expect this in advance, you are less likely to misinterpret normal mental wear as evidence of failure. The later part of the exam is often where discipline matters most, because that is when impatience, self-doubt, and shortcut thinking become most tempting. Mentally preparing for this means deciding ahead of time that the final stretch deserves the same care as the beginning. You still need to read closely, respect the wording, and trust structured reasoning. Some candidates lose points late not because the questions are harder, but because they stop engaging with them properly. Their mind wants the experience to be over, so it starts cutting corners. Knowing that tendency ahead of time makes it easier to resist. The finish line is not the moment to abandon process. It is the moment to rely on it most. After the exam ends, many learners experience a flood of second-guessing, replaying difficult questions and trying to calculate their performance from memory. This reaction is understandable, but it is rarely useful. The mind is often unreliable immediately after a stressful performance, and it tends to highlight the hardest moments while ignoring the many ordinary questions you answered competently. Preparing mentally includes thinking about this stage too, because emotional recovery matters. If the exam felt difficult, that does not mean you failed. Serious exams are supposed to feel demanding. If some questions still bother you afterward, that does not mean they outweighed everything else. The healthiest response is to let the exam be over once it is over. You gave your effort, you used your judgment, and now the task is complete. Carrying the exam around in your head for hours does not improve the outcome. It only prolongs the stress. One quiet sign of mature preparation is knowing how to release the experience once you can no longer influence it. And that is an important skill in professional life more broadly. By the time exam day arrives, the real goal is not to create a perfect mental state. The goal is to create a workable one. You want realistic expectations, a calm start, steady pacing, good self-talk, and enough emotional control to handle uncertainty without turning it into panic. You want to expect some stress without being ruled by it, and you want to remember that performance is usually built on disciplined reasoning more than on flashes of inspiration. Exam day preparation matters because it protects all the work that came before it. The knowledge you built during study needs a stable environment if it is going to show up well under pressure, and that environment is created partly by how you think about the day. When you know what to expect and prepare mentally for the normal challenges of tension, fatigue, and uncertainty, the exam becomes less mysterious and far more manageable. That is the last question in this set, and it leaves you with an important reminder. Your job on exam day is not to be flawless, but to stay steady enough for your preparation to do its work.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.